Hello, good news, everyone. It's Thursday morning. That means we get to talk with Scott Ritter. We got ceasefires in Ukraine. We got Nato looking kind of zombie-esque these days. And of course, the Ukrainian front is looking a little rugged. Let's talk. Hello, Garland and Scott here. And I know what you're thinking. I get to watch Scott Ritter online, but I sure would like to find out where he is and hang out with Scott Ritter sometime, meet him, maybe get to take a picture in person. Who knows what? Well, guess what? Opportunities abound. Scott Ritter. Let's go to scottritter.com. And by the way, if you'll notice at scottritter.com, you'll notice a little blue button at the top that says donate. So you can certainly donate to help Scott Ritter in his fine works. We got events going on, Scott. We got all kind of things happening. Fill us in. What's happening and what do you have coming up?
Well, this is an exciting week because we were able to bring Anya Kay, the very popular Polish-based podcaster with whom I collaborated on a book covering Ukraine, the Scott Ritter Interviews Through the Eyes of Anya Kay. And we're bringing her to the United States for a week. She arrived on Tuesday, the 14th. Last night, the 15th in Bronx, New York, we held a book event, well attended. It was great. Jose Vega, whom I believe
Yep.
Helped organize it, and he moderated the discussion. It was just a wonderful opportunity to meet Anya Kay in person. We wrote a book together based upon two plus years worth of podcasts that we had done together. But you never really get to know a person until you meet them in, face to face in person and stuff. An absolutely wonderful human being, every bit as genuine as she appears on her podcast. And we had a fantastic event in the Bronx. So we're going to be doing the same thing on January 19th, Sunday night in Washington, D.C. at Busboys and Poets. And I think we're going to have Garland Nixon there, who's going to moderate that discussion. And, I did a book event last month, Disarm at the Time of Perestroika book. It was well attended, a great venue, and I think people come on out. It's a great opportunity to have some good food, good company, and a good conversation. And then we're going to close it off on January 21st in Poughkeepsie, New York, at Farmers and Chef. It's a fantastic restaurant. John Lasik is the owner, and he prepares just a world-class menu. So come and get some great food. And again, Anya Kay and I will discuss our book, discuss collaboration process, discuss the role of podcasting, going forward, alternative media, and take questions from the audience. It's a unique opportunity. She's not based in America and doesn't often come here. I think this is her first trip back to America since 2010. So, here's a chance to meet a fantastic person in person and to support her work, get a copy of the book, get the book signed. And, we put a lot of time and effort to bring her here and organize this brief week-long tour. And we would certainly, I think you'd be remiss not to take advantage of this. So the Busboys and Poets is an open event. I think everybody show up. I don't know if he's gone to doing tickets yet. The Poughkeepsie event is a ticketed event because it's being held at a world-class restaurant. For the price of your ticket, you get this fantastic meal, you get a copy of the book, and you get conversation with Anya and I.
Awesome. All right, everybody. So there you go. Opportunity. You want to hang out with Scott. You want to meet Scott. And also go to scottritter.com for all the Scott's info, what he's doing. All right, Scott. A couple of things going. Oh, by the way, you guys, we got a join button now. So you can click join and become a member. And of course, any way you can donate and help the channels. Appreciate it. If you can't, make sure you share this on all your social media platforms. Scott talked about it. Right now, it is critical that everybody gets involved in alternative media. And the way you can get involved is simply by, maybe you can't afford to donate, maybe you can. Doesn't matter. How you can get involved is share these types of shows on all your social media platforms. Let's get started, Scott. Interesting stuff going on. Here are my thoughts. We got 16 months of Joe Biden saying, I've tried, but the Israelis won't listen to me. I beg Benjamin Netanyahu, please, my God, stop the carnage, and he won't do it. I'm reading that Trump sent some guy named Smitkoff or something over there, that the Israelis say, oh, we can't talk to you right now. And he says, shut up. Yes, you can. And he says, it's over. Bye. And he leaves and goes back to Qatar or something. And maybe am I misrepresenting or am I misunderstanding the way this went down? It kind of makes it look like Biden's been full of crap for 16 months and just Trump decided it was over and it was over. Or I don't know. Scott, your thoughts?
Well, you know, we've had this eternal question. I get it all the time. Who's in charge? Is it the Israelis telling the Americans what to do on behalf of Israel? Or is it America in charge of Israel, but you have the Israeli lobby controlling America? But then basically the implication is that America is 100% subordinated to Israel. Well, that certainly was the case with the Biden administration. I mean, when you have a Secretary of State who stands up and says, I am a Zionist, when you have the President Biden stand up and say, I am a Zionist, and then you're surprised then when they can't get anything done, when they say, we've told the Israelis, but the Israelis talked back. That lets you know who wears the pants in that relationship. We finally have a president-elect, who understands the true nature of this relationship. And I've said this from day one. America can shut Israel down that quick. Israel doesn't exist. The Jewish lobby in America can be shut down that quick. They don't do it because of political expediency. They don't do it because they don't want to put the time and effort into it. But Trump sent a representative over there who sat Netanyahu down and said, shut up and listen. You're done. You're finished. It's over. You don't have a vote. You have no vote. Okay? All that crap you're saying about there to your little constituents in Israel about how you bought American Congress and all that. New sheriff in town. You haven't bought anybody. Wait, what about $100 million that Adelson's widow gave Trump? Don't matter. Shut up. Sit down. You're going to do what we're going to tell you to do, or we're pulling the plug. You'll be out in the street. No, you'll be in jail. Okay, and your little country will collapse. We're not playing this game anymore. This war is over. And guess what? Netanyahu sat down, shut up, and the war looks like it's... Now, he's going to play stupid games. He's playing a stupid game right now. But, you know... In 5 days, a envoy from a president-elect accomplished more than Joe Biden accomplished in 16 months. This war could have ended on day one. Look at what the terms of the ceasefire are. The terms of the ceasefire are exactly what Hamas was asking for after October 7th. Exactly. Now, a lot of death and destruction has taken place, but what's emerging here is the fact that it was not Hamas that prevented a ceasefire from ever happening. It was Israel. It was always Israel. It was always Netanyahu. And Netanyahu is going to pay a heavy price for this because... And
Trump said it,
didn't he? Pardon?
Trump said it, didn't he? Didn't Trump say... I saw a video where he was saying, oh, yeah, Israel doesn't want a deal.
Oh, he said that even before... Trump did an interview before October 7th where he was talking about Israel. And he said, look, there's two parties to this conflict. And this conflict can only be resolved when they sit down and they talk. He said, but there's one side that doesn't want to talk, and it's Israel. So Trump knew this from the get-go. Trump also has understands Netanyahu, has met Netanyahu, and what he said about Netanyahu in private, I wasn't there, so I'm only repeating what people claim he said about Netanyahu private, but it isn't complimentary. He doesn't like Netanyahu. There's bad blood there. But the point is, this conflict didn't need to go the way it went. This didn't have to happen. It happened because of Benjamin Netanyahu, and he's going to pay a huge price because there are dead hostages. People who would be alive today had Netanyahu simply taken the deal that they have now and done it earlier. But, we'll see what happens. All I know is that the Biden administration just exposed itself for being the cooks of Israel. That's a horrible word to use, but it's the only word that matters, counts on this one. Basically totally submissive to Israel. Trump came in and showed that he has big brass ones, and this is his approach. It's not going to always work. We have the Russian conflict with Ukraine. And if Trump tries this with Russia, I think it'll be a different outcome. But with Israel, he put Netanyahu in its place, and he got a result. Haaretz just wrote an article about it that basically said, the guy came in and told Netanyahu to shut up. This is a situation. Do it. This could have happened on day one. Biden just simply could have sent somebody, not named Tony Blinken or, Jake Sullivan, anybody who empowered by the president to tell Netanyahu, sit down and shut up. But the problem is Biden couldn't do that because he didn't have what it takes to stand up to Congress, to stand up to lobbyists, and he would feel the pressure. Trump doesn't care. That's the difference. Trump just doesn't care.
Well, I'll put it like this. It's the difference between I go in a store and I see some kid acting up and some parent going, oh, Bobby, please stop. And Bobby just keeps doing, oh, please stop. And I tell you all this. My dad was a longshoreman. Do you think he asked? Do you think he said, Garland, please stop? He looked at me. That's all he did. If I was doing something, he looked at me. And he gave me that look. And I stopped because I knew he was not much on negotiation. You know what I mean? So, you can't ask. If you ask Netanyahu, of course he's going to say yeah. But I think you and I are on the same page, and I know that you probably got the same thing that I got. Oh no, Israel's in charge of everything. We're subordinate. And I said no. They got no. Now I will differ you. Let me throw this at you, Scott. I differ a bit with your evaluation that it won't work with Russia. Here's why. Because he ain't going to do it on Russia. He's going to do it in Ukraine. You know what I mean? Because if he says to Israel, you're our puppet, we arm you, we give you money, we give you everything, damn it, stop. You're making us look bad. You're doing stuff we don't want. Stop it. They got to stop. But the analogy for the Russian conflict is Ukraine. We give you everything. We give you money. We give you this. And you stole 90% of it in anyway. We ain't giving you anymore. You know what I mean? The analogy for the Ukraine conflict is both Europe and Ukraine as the puppet state, the one that we empower and control, or whatever the hell you said you want. And I think the analogy is this. For all the big talk about Macron and Starmer and all these people that are going to stand up to Trump, when Trump takes power Monday, brother, they're going to fold. And they're going to do a Annalena Baerbock 360, as we call it. The rest of us would call it 180. So what do you think about the analogy that the Europeans and the Ukrainians, they're going to have to fold when Trump comes in, and they're talking a bunch of crap, but they're all going to bend the knee to the ring of the new emperor?
I have no problem with that analogy. My only issue is that Trump isn't surrounded by people who are saying this. Trump is surrounded by people who are saying the exact opposite, that the pressure has to be put on Russia. The articles that are coming out, allegedly based upon the thinking of the Trump team, is that they're going to try to lure Russia into accepting a deal by some sanctions relief, but that if Russia doesn't go along with what they want, which appears to be a ceasefire, a DMZ patrolled by the Europeans, which just isn't going to happen. Not a single European troop will be allowed in Ukraine by Russia. That then they will start targeting Russian oil and energy, not just by targeting Russia, but targeting the nations that buy the oil in an effort to collapse the market and bring Russia down. That has zero chance of working. Now,
but it will raise inflation.
yeah, Trump is the president, and so he doesn't have to listen to his advisors. And I hope what happens is that Trump sits down and has his advisors there giving him the stuff, and he says, "Thank you very much." Put Putin on the phone, and he says, "Hey, Mr. President, like to meet soon. Let's set up a date. Yeah, I'm gonna be drafting something myself. I'm gonna send you a personal letter. You know, he likes personal letters. He sent them to Kim Jong Un. Pissed off Bolton and Pompeo because they wanted to in the crafting of the letter, but Trump did personal communications. His detractors call them love letters. But the point is, those letters got Trump to have 3 meetings with Kim Jong Un, which, had he not been sabotaged by his advisors, his employees, we would have had a completely different situation in Korea than the one that we face today. I think that Trump can deal with Vladimir Putin as a person, and sit down with Putin and come up with a solution to this problem. But if Trump relies on his advisors on this one, that's over. But again, I'd love to know the background of this, because again, all the people that he brought into his cabinet are pro-Israeli Zionists, foaming at the mouth, anti-Hamas. We're going to deport anybody who dares support Hamas, supports the Palestinian cause, I think what happened is Trump sent his envoy in on personal instructions and said, just tell him to shut up and sit down. You're speaking on behalf of the man who's going to be president, and dictate the following to them. And that this wasn't coordinated with anybody in Team Trump. And I think that's the way it's going to go forward. Now, reading your comments section, people are like, Scott's saying Trump's good. Guys, you don't listen to a freaking word I say. Okay, those words didn't come out of my mouth. I simply said that Trump sent an envoy in. The envoy sat Benjamin Netanyahu down and read him the Riot Act, and we now have a ceasefire that wasn't going to happen. Is the ceasefire going to work? I don't know. All I know is we have one that could have been done 16 months ago, and Biden didn't make it happen. Trump did. That's all I'm saying. You can read into it any way you choose to. You can claim that you're going to do this, that, and the other thing. I don't care. You do you. I'm simply saying that Donald Trump accomplished in 5 days what Joe Biden couldn't accomplish in 16 months. That's it. Will the ceasefire succeed? Don't know. Is it a sham? Don't know. I'm saying there's a ceasefire. That's it. And for all you pro-Palestinian people, I'll put that in quote marks because none of you really are. They're dancing in the streets right now in Gaza. They're dancing in the streets. If they're happy, you should be happy. The fact that you're not happy when they're happy says everything about you.
Yeah, it's their lives, and they apparently believe something's better. The people in Yemen are saying, yeah, good things are happening. So look, let's roll with it and see what happens. But I'm with you. Look, hey, to me, it's not about even Trump. This is not personal who I like or love. We have positions of justice that we want to see in the world and people's lives saved. And if it's happening and it's good, and Frederick Douglass said, I will join with any man to do good and no man to do evil. That's fair enough. And I also think that something that you said, Scott, and that is about Ukraine and about Trump's policies. And I forgot who I heard say this early, but I think it applies here. Traditionally, what we hear is, but what we see is a lot of traditional politicians have cabinet-driven policies, right? They bring in Jake Sullivan and this guy, you bring in Richard Pearl and the Wolfowitz and these guys, and you look at the cabinet and you can judge what the policy of the president, you are what your cabinet says you are kind of thing, right? To paraphrase of Bill Parcells quote, "You are what your record says you are." But big fan of Parcells. I love Parcells. He was great. But at any rate, my point being, the tuna, I don't know where that came from. But my point is, I just don't believe that Trump is going to have a traditional cabinet driven policy driven by cabinet. Let's not forget, he fires half of his cabinet every 6 months. He goes through 2 or 3 secretaries of state. Rex Tillerson, you forgot about him. He goes through 2 or 3 CIA directors, blah, blah, blah. I think he brings them in, and every now and then they say something that aggravates them, and he fires them. But that Trump is a very top-down policy person, and you can't look at his cabinet and deduce what he's going to do. And I think that confuses people because that's traditional politics. But Trump, and again, I ain't saying he's good or bad, he's not a traditional politician. And you can't analyze what he did based on what Obama or Bush or whoever did.
Yeah, you know, your normal president is a political animal who came up through a system together with a whole bunch of other people. They entered in and they had the political bug. Now, some people take that into a policy direction. Some people take that into an implementation, policy formulation, implementation. But as you rise up through the system, people go out and they either become diplomats, they become soldiers, they become bankers, lawyers, whatever, and they rise up, and it creates what we call the establishment. And your average president is a member of that establishment. And as this person who is going to become president rises, they work with people in the establishment who are like thinkers, people who support their candidacy, support their policies, etc. So by the time they become president, they have taken a selection of that establishment and brought it up with them. And from that, they select a cabinet that's going to support them. Because the idea of a cabinet is to have people help push your policies. All right, that's the normal way it works. And the system's broken because the establishment is inherently corrupt and da-da-da-da-da-da. Trump isn't that person. So the idea that Trump, and he learned this the hard way, round 1. Trump came in as president and he was like, well, I don't have an establishment group. So he turned to Chris Christie, if you remember, the head of his transition team. And Chris Christie turned to the Heritage Foundation and others and brought in people who weren't Trump's people. And they tried to create this slice of the establishment that would support. And so Trump went up, brought these people in, and he was betrayed every step of the way by just about everybody, because none of the people there were to promote Trump's policies. They were there to promote the policies of the establishment that Trump was trying to unravel. This time, I think Trump has learned his lesson. I love the fact that so many traditional members of Congress, especially the Senate that does confirmation, are so upset with the nominees he's brought in. And some of their,
me too.
to be honest, some of their criticism is legitimate. I'm not saying these guys are perfect, but I love the fact that Trump went, I don't care. You see, I'm creating my cabinet, and it's not your cabinet. It's not the establishment's cabinet. It's my, because all the senators that are critical of Trump are from the establishment. These are people that tried to rise to the top. They didn't quite have that presidential push, so they leveled out at senator, which is pretty good. But that's where they're at. They are the establishment, and now they're sitting there going, we don't want a cabinet that doesn't think like us, that doesn't reflect what we want. And Trump's saying, that's not the game I'm playing. Now, what game is Trump playing? I spent a lot of time studying Vladimir Putin. I've been watching him for 25 years and study how he works. And I look at his leadership style. I take a look at how he travels around and meets with governors and people and listens, he talks. So you get a feel that when a decision is made by Putin, you have an understanding, at least I do, of how that decision was made, the processes. And that's why I don't buy into this dictator and oligarch and all this nonsense. I recognize him as a leader of a Russian way of doing business. Study Donald Trump. Now you say, well, how do I study Donald Trump? What data is out there? I'll give you the easiest one. What is it? 15 seasons of The Apprentice.
Yeah. Yep.
Watch The Apprentice and see how this man works. Look at what he does. First of all, he doesn't have an establishment mindset. He has a corporate mindset. And he comes in and he says, I'm going to take these people who all are pushing for this one thing, and I'm going to split them into teams, and then the teams are going to compete against each other. And from that, I learn how people think. I learn what people do. He's not doing it to have them advise. It's a game for him. It's sort of like Squid Game or whatever the hell that Korean show is where everybody gets popped. But he watches that, and then the losing team he takes apart and he fires people. You're fired. You're fired. You're fired. But in the process, he's learned about these people and they've learned about him. So in the end, the teams that as they survive, they've learned what Trump wants. And so they modify how they behave. So by the time you get to the final people, they're doing what Trump wants them to do. I think this is Donald Trump's cabinet. They're not there to advise Trump. They're there to play a stupid game of Donald Trump presidential apprentice. And Trump will do what Trump wants to do. But he wants people working for him, not with him. They work for him to do what Trump wants to do. They're not there to advise him. Trump doesn't want advice. Trump wants to accomplish a task, and he needs people capable of helping him accomplish that task. And so we're going to be seeing 4 years of The Apprentice. That's Trump's leadership style. Will it work? I don't know. Do I think it's great? I'm not comfortable with it. I'm a traditionalist. I'd like America to actually be a nation where we have an establishment focused on what's best for America, not what's best for corporate interests and things of that nature. But that's not who we got as president right now. We've got somebody totally different. And I think we're going to be in for a totally different experience over the next 4 years.
As somebody said in the chat, nothing could be worse than Biden. Nothing could be worse than Biden, where every morning you're looking out the window to see if you see a flash of a nuclear, explosion every day. You're like, if we can just make it till Monday. The last few days,
that you mentioned that. I just want to. I'm glad you said that. Yesterday, I had a 2-hour conversation with Dmitry Trenin, who is a senior. He used to head up the Carnegie Endowment for Peace in Moscow. He used to be part of the back when America and Russia were talking about partnership. He was the man that was making the partnership work. But he has the ear of Vladimir Putin. He is a man of substance in Russia. Because we've collaborated together on trying to stop nuclear war over the course of the last year. And I was saying over and over again how close we were to nuclear war. And there's a lot of people out there who are going, Scotty, calm down. It's not as bad. No, you're exaggerating. Trenin yesterday said America will never understand how close they came to having not just one time, not just twice, but at least 3 times a nuclear war, how absolutely close we came. Putin, he said, was under more pressure than you can possibly imagine from the Russian system that said they have crossed every red line. And if we don't stop them now, it will be the end of us. We must act now. We must use nuclear weapons. Guys, we are so lucky to be alive today. And it's not because of anything that happened here in the United States. It's simply because Putin decided that he wasn't going to push the button. But we were provoking him so much. The Biden administration almost killed everybody. And Kamala Harris, had she been elected, would have killed everybody. We have this president in now that none of us really understand. We're not experts on Donald Trump. I don't think there is an expert on Donald Trump. We're trying to figure out who this guy is. But all I know is that he doesn't want a nuclear war. And he has articulated that. And that helps me sleep easy at night.
I felt the same thing on a number of occasions, because this is what I always think. What would I do? Right. And I think to myself, I thought to myself on a number of occasions, if I were the Russians, I'd have to be thinking about a nuclear attack. You would the same way. If you were the president of Russia, there were a number of occasions where you would have to think it. And if you did it, there's only one option: a massive decapitation strike, preemptive. That's the only option. And at times, if I were president, I wouldn't have done it, of course, as Putin, because I wouldn't want to end it. But I would have had to consider a complete and total decapitation strike of America, figuring, okay, they've lost their minds. They're going to try to kill us. That's the only way. So luckily, so far, we got a few more days. Fingers crossed, we might make it out of this thing. Now, let me do that, which brings us right here. I did a video. Oh, by the way, I'm going to go back and find that and put this up. I did a video maybe a year ago, a bunch of months back, and I said, will Vladimir Putin and President Xi save the world? And I talked about the world, it will survive, get through the Biden administration by their grace, because they choose not to kill us all, not to act. Now, that brings me right here, Scott. I just did this video yesterday. You'll love this. Look at this. NATO is finished. We got a zombie in a military outfit with a NATO flag, right? And my argument is kind of like there was a zombie movie where this woman's running through the streets trying to, a zombie apocalypse, and she's trying to find her. I've got to get to my friends' apartments to make sure they're okay. She finally gets there. She opens the door, and they all run from her, and we find out that she was a zombie the whole time. She just didn't know it. Right. right. It was an interesting end to the movie. Right. She's like, she goes to hug. They're like, they all go run away, and they show her. She's like blue and green. Right. Now, here's my point. That's how I see NATO. They're zombie. How do they? Look, you got Mark Rutte. We're going to have to give 5% of our 10% of our GDP. And I thought, these bastards are so broke. 5% of their GDP in the next year or two after they've been industrialized ain't going to be enough to buy a Happy Meal. At any rate, my argument, NATO is finished, zombie, done. I do not see how they survive this conflict. One other thing, because the people are going to be so furious, they're going to be ready to Luigi their bosses. Anyway, Scott, their leaders.
Well, we already see, let's start with the Luigiing of their leaders. Look at Germany. The government has collapsed largely because of the policy stances they've taken in relationship to NATO-driven policies, such as the sanctioning of Russia, providing unfettered support for Ukraine. There will be an election in February, March. I don't know. Is it February
20th? Almost exactly a month after Trump comes to power, and I think that's going to have an effect on things. I might add.
And this election, right now, the Christian Democratic Party has a slight lead, but the momentum is with Alternative for Deutschland, who has said that if they are empowered, they will withdraw from the European Union. The European Union is the political fabric around which the current iteration of NATO has been placed. The two can't survive without the other. So if European Union collapses, NATO collapses. If NATO collapses, the European Union collapses. Sticking with Germany, last year, in 2022, the German government of Olaf Scholz, the one that just failed, said we have to rebuild our military in response to the new reality of what's happening in Ukraine. We need 100 billion euro. It's a lot of euro to rebuild their military, and they got the money. Last year, Pistorius, the defense minister, goes to the parliament and says, "Yeah, we need to talk about the budget. We need to increase spending by, I forget what it was, 7, 8, 9%. It was a number. That 100 billion he gave us, it's gone. Well, where's the military? Well, we didn't really accomplish much with it, you see, because Germany was so fundamentally broken. It's like buying, there's that old Ted Danson movie, The Money Pit. I think it's Ted Danson movie, but Goldie Hawn might be in it. I don't know. But the bottom line is they buy this house, and they try to fix it, and you're just pouring money in, and nothing's happening. The house is not getting fixed because it's so fundamentally broken. They poured $100 billion into the German military, and it's broken, still broken. So they say, we need more money to continue these projects. And the parliament came back and went, we don't have that money. You see, we're broke. We're flat ass broke. We're going to give you, I don't know, 1.6%, which is less than inflation. So at a time when the German military is saying we got to flex our muscles, be strong, stand up, they're actually shrinking because they don't have enough money. So the German military is shrinking. All of the major militaries in Europe are shrinking. The British, who talk the loudest, shrinking. The French, pathetic, everything. They can't afford it. Now you have Rutte, who, just so everybody knows, I'm on record saying this, when he became the Secretary General, I said he will be the last Secretary General of NATO. He's it. Rutte's come out and said a couple interesting things. The most interesting one is the one that drives everything else. He said that the Russian defense industry produces more in 3 months than all of NATO's defense industry, including the United States, produces in a year. So understanding that means that you have to, in order to compete with Russia, you have to completely mobilize or transition your industry into defense industry. Under the best of circumstances, this is a horribly expensive proposition. And it has a detrimental impact on your overall economy. But these aren't the best of circumstances because there is no economy in Europe today. So there's nothing that you can bring in. So all these numbers that he throws out there, we've been trying to get to 2%, but now he says we have to get to 5%. Well, there's a reason why you couldn't get to 2%. Now you want to get to 5%. And then he says if the United States withdraws, in order for Europe to build its own military alliance, we have to get to 10% of GDP. And to do that, to get to 5%, he's saying we need you to cut pensions. We need you to end social programs. We need you to basically gut your own people to build this military. Europe will reject this wholeheartedly, and we see that. We see Romania rejecting it. We see the Czech Republic rejecting it. Hungary's already rejected it. Slovakia's rejected it. Germany's rejecting it. France will reject it. The British, who knows what's going to happen with their elections, they're going to reject it. Europe can't do this. This is the end of NATO. And Trump comes in saying that he's already inclined to withdraw from NATO. He will, I believe, give NATO a chance to say, if you want to be a military organization, you got to put the money up now. NATO won't be able to do that. And he'll say, then we're done. We're unplugged and we're out of there, and NATO will collapse. Mark Rutte will be the last Secretary General of NATO. NATO is a zombie right now, literally a zombie. It has zero meaningful military capability. Zero. They can't project power. I challenge NATO right now, in a week's time, to send 60,000 combat-capable troops into Ukraine. In a week's time. You have that rapid deployment thing you guys were doing, right? Right, Rutte? Oh, that was Stoltenberg. I'm sorry, Stoltenberg did it. But you inherited it, right, Rutte? You got 300,000 guys ready to rock and roll right now. Oh, it's not 300,000. It's 70,000. And most of those are Turks. Good luck getting the Turks into Ukraine.
Right.
NATO
the Turks
is
ain't
nothing.
fighting the Russians.
NATO is nothing. Zero. Nothing. And that's just the reality. And it will never be anything. It used to be something, but today it's nothing. It's a shell. It's basically a giant residence that has been allowed to get black mold and the foundations rotten and the termites are in the wood and every problem you could have in a home, pipes leaking. It means that the only way you fix this is to tear the whole house down and start over. And then maybe you have to build a house that you can sustain within your budget. You can't sit there and say, well, we're going to build $1 million mansion, but I got $100,000 house budget. You got to build the house that you want, which means you got to be realistic about the world you live in. And Europe has to stop this nonsense about standing up and fighting Russia, about Russia's going to invade. Therefore, we need to build a military capable of withstanding a Russian invasion. Russia's not going to invade anything. Nothing. Russia doesn't want to. Russia can't. I mean, I know Russia has this great military, but come on, guys. Russia's put 900,000 troops into Ukraine, and look at the slow rate of advance there.
Were they going to occupy all of Europe with troops?
And now you're saying
how
that
many troops would it take to occupy all of Europe? The whole
it would
Russian,
take 15%. it would take 15% of Russia's total population,
Exactly.
12, 15 million soldiers to do that. Russia's not doing that game.
It's absurd.
That's not the game they want to play. Russia's in the business of, reviving its economy, becoming doing diplomacy. Russia doesn't lead with its military. Russia leads with Lavrov. And
I don't know about this Scott. I don't know if you saw the introduction to the Paris Olympics, but trust me when I tell you this: Russia does not want Western Europe.
Right, Russia doesn't want to be in Paris. Not the way
They
it is
don't
right
want
now.
like blue guys in dresses and beards dancing around. They don't like that stuff in Moscow.
Yeah, no. Look, Russia's not looking for a fight with Europe. Russia just wants to live in peace. But Russia recognizes that Europe has been problematic for it. And as long as NATO exists, Russia has to create spheres of interest. They have to create buffers. Those buffers traditionally included neutral nations like Finland. Huge mistake for Finland to join NATO. You joined I love it when people go, well, NATO's expanding. Finland and Sweden. Well, they'll be the shortest term members of a failed organization ever. What happens when NATO does collapse in 5 years? How's Finland and Sweden looking now? So no, I agree with you that NATO is a zombie organization, and I say this somebody I actually have a family member who works for NATO. He's a European senior position in NATO, and I don't like the idea of him becoming unemployed, but they'll find way else to employ people. But NATO is an organization that has no legitimate function today. It's a very dangerous organization because in order to sustain it, you need conflict, and the only place they can plug in on conflict is Russia, and a conflict between NATO and Russia has the potential of going nuclear and killing us all. So for all the Americans out there saying, well, no, we have to hold on to NATO because we've been doing that for 80 years, it's a poison pill. And if we keep that poison pill in our mouth, one of these days we're going to bite on it. It's going to kill us.
Yeah, and Europe is it's rotting from the inside out. You know what I mean? It's rotting. Their issue is not going to be right now. They're still playing the narrative. The narrative is we're united. Joe Biden, no, we're more united than ever, and we're united to defend ourselves from Russia internally. I don't know if you've been paying attention to what happened in Romania, but they basically overthrew the government of Romania. And then one of these EU people was recently filmed talking, saying, basically we did that in Romania and we'll do it in Germany too. But there's like hundreds of thousands of people in the street in Romania. I even think this, based on what happened in Georgia, that there are a lot of other countries that would be facing some kind of a similar, coup, that are looked at the Georgians and said, darn it, they did it. That's the problem with an example. You know what I mean? They did it. And the Romanians are like, they did it, and they didn't get overthrown. And now I don't think the Romanians are going to sit still and allow the EU to overthrow their government. And I think at some point, this guy, Georgescu or whatever his name, it's going to be hard for the people in power in Romania to keep him out of power. And he's another one that says, I can't stand NATO and the EU.
Yeah, no, I mean, they had presidential elections, and he did surprisingly well, unexpectedly well in the first round, and survived it, moved in, and they were literally setting up the second round of elections, which would have been the final round. And polls had him winning hands down. When the European/NATO intelligence went to Romanian intelligence and said, we think the Russians interfered with the first round. I'm talking about TikTok.
On TikTok.
Yeah, TikTok videos and all that. And then they took it to the court, and the court went, oh my God, we have to first they stopped the election. Then they annulled the first round of elections. But now the courts come out and said, yeah, there wasn't any evidence. We looked at it and it didn't happen. But they're not reversing their decision. So you have hundreds of thousands of Romanians in the street. Many of them are supporters of this gentleman whose name you did a better job of pronouncing than I ever will. Gorgescu or something of that nature. That, yeah. It's not his fault. It's my ignorance. I just want the Romanians to know out there that I'm not making fun of Romanian names or anything like that. I'm just professing the fact that I can't pronounce it. It's not your fault. It's my fault. But the people in the streets, about 20% of the people in the streets don't want him to be president. They're part of the opposition, but they say this is a democracy. You can't do that. You're not allowed to intervene like that. We want an election. If he wins the election, that's democracy. But we want the election without any interference on the part of the court. So we'll see the direction this goes. Romania is in a state of crisis right now. But if he becomes the president, it's bad news for NATO, because if you take a look at all the talk that's out there about sending a NATO corps in there and stuff, you basically have two vectors into Ukraine from NATO. You have the Polish vector, and then you have a Romanian vector. Both are capable of providing the entree of NATO forces, the logistics, sustainability, port facilities, rail connectivity, airfields, etc. But if you're going to, one of the areas that they've always talked about, the French, that we're going to protect Odessa from the Russians. And so they're going to send their 60,000 strong corps through Romania in there, and that's their lifeline. And the Romanian president's going, nah, we're hitting the off switch. And suddenly, even if NATO could project power into Ukraine, which they can't, and do you really want to initiate something? Let's say they could, and they initiated something through Romania, and the Romanian president comes in and goes, off switch, we're done. We're not playing that. All the stupidity, who's really feeling pretty stupid right now? Sansu, the president of Moldova, who has fed off of the current Romanian administration into posturing herself to be this anti-Russian force, and speaking strong about Transnistria, etc. And Romania might get a president that's going to say off switch, and now she's going to be out there all by herself, exposed with no support. In Europe, I think the Czech Republic just had an election where their president, or somebody just had an election. I thought it was the Czech Republic, where a new president or the current president has changed their attitude. They're changing their mind about this. Austria just brought in a right wing.
I think maybe Czechoslovakia. You got Austria. But bottom line, it seems like most of that Eastern European area, which makes sense because they're the ones that would be smushed first in a, you know what I mean? A war starts, they're the ones that get hit first. But it seems like country after country in the U.S., I always bring this up, Scott, when this war first started. Scott Ritter came on the critical hour with Garland Nixon and Dr. Wilmer Leon within the first few weeks and said, none of these administrations in any of these countries in Europe are going to survive, and they are falling quickly. And I suspect, Scott, that if there's some kind of deal that goes down, the people will get even angrier, because they were told, we have to do this, because if we don't, the Russians will keep coming. And if there's a deal and the Russians don't keep coming, then they're going to have to ask, what was this all for? That's a bad question for the people who have been running this thing in Europe.
Revolutionary change is what I said. There will be revolutionary change in Europe, and we're seeing it. But the thing that I said that would trigger it is the economic blowback. Remember, I was saying this before we knew, because at that time everyone was saying, no, the sanctions are going to bring the Russians down to their knees. I said, no, you have fundamentally no understanding of the politics of energy. These sanctions are going to destroy Europe. And in doing so, when they blow back, the European economies will collapse. And when they collapse, the social structures that empower these political and economic elites will collapse, and there will be revolutionary change. Every single one of these leaders who started at the top encouraging this policy will fall. And we're seeing them right now. It's like dominoes, click, 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 click. Macron is in very, very hot water right now. There was a while ago where, I don't know what you think about Justin Trudeau. I'm not a fan. But, there's a while ago, though, that, did you really think that Trudeau was going to resign in disgrace? No, everybody's just like, no, he's a pathetic Canadian leader, and the Canadians will continue to foster his pathetic, sort of like France and Macron. I mean, Macron is the walking, talking embodiment of incompetence. And yet he's like this permanent president of France. not that permanent. I think that Macron is going to resign sooner rather than later because he can't. France is a failed experiment, and it's his experiment that has failed. Just like Canada is a failed experiment. It was Trudeau's experiment. It failed. Trudeau had to resign. He had no choice because it failed. Macron's on his way out too. And when France goes, the government that will come in is going to be Le Pen's government. The far and watch complete. And you know who I feel sorry for, sort of, is Giorgia Meloni, the Italian premier, because she knows what side she wants to be on, but she was a political realist, and she played what she called the safe bet, which is she came in and she said, well, I'm going to play the European Union and NATO game because that's what everybody's playing. And she sort of stepped in there and she's out there dancing with them and all that. And now she's looking around going, oh, damn it, I did the wrong thing. I should have been Giorgia Meloni from the start. I should have been on the side. I should have been railing against this because now I'd be the leader of Europe. But she still has some potential. That's why she went to Mar-a-Lago. I think that's why she's talking to Trump. So I put her to the side, but Italian politics, even in the best of times, that's why we make fun of what we call the Italian parliament, because you can't keep a government in place because there's so many constituencies in collapse. I don't know what her future will be, but her future will be, I think, driven by Italian realities, not European realities. So she's immune, I think, from the other things that are going on in Europe. Italy hasn't overcommitted itself to Ukraine politically, economically, or militarily. So there's, I take Italy as the major European nations. I put Italy to the side, but everyone else, done. They're all going to fall.
Yeah, a friend of mine was in Greece recently, and he said he was surprised because, there's a strong history of a lot of socialists and communists in Greece. And he said he knew a lot of people that in his family, right? And he said they were very pro-Trump. And he said it wasn't ideological at all. Well, I'm sure the Greeks are Orthodox Christians and traditionally very close to the Russians, very anti-fascist. They do not like the Nazis. And he said it was basically, hey, Trump wants to hopefully stop the war. And so they were supporting his foreign policy. So they were all hoping for him to win. This was, I think, right around the election, or happy because he won, whatever. And he said he was surprised when he got there. But at any rate, let us continue. The front line. I saw, who was it that said that tweet? No, was it Glenn Deason, I believe, who said the Russians are 6.5 kilometers from
Dnipropetrovsk.
Yeah. What the heck? I don't know what that really means, or I can't even pronounce the well enough to say to make something up for that word. But I put it like this: it don't sound good for the Ukrainians with all this business about we want to negotiate from a position of strength. And my understanding is in that particular country, even in that particular area, they don't have any really entrenched defenses. So when the Russians get there, they can kind of walk through. Sounds like things are looking kind of bleak these days. I'm reading a lot about soldiers walking away, leaving, running, holding up the white flag. Just sounds like we're seeing a slow collapse. And here's my thought. I'll throw this at you, Scott. One last thing. If you're fighting in a war and Monday Trump comes in and this guy wants out as quickly as possible, and I'm standing out here and I might die, not to defend my position or to defend, the guys that are around me, we're all a team. None of that. It's now, this is a lost cause. The new president comes in and says he's going to end it any day. I'm not defending any damn thing. I'm just out here to die. I got to think that it's going to have a material effect on the people that are out there fighting, knowing that Trump just came in, he hates Zelensky, and he wants this damn war over. You got nobody backing you, Scott.
Again, I'm not on the front line, so I can't speak about when I was on the front line with the Ukrainian soldiers. Can't do that. Can't even say it with the Russians. When I tried to go on the front line with the Russian soldiers, the Ministry of Defense wouldn't let me get anywhere near the front line. They're like, no, old man, stay back in there. We don't want you killed. But what I'll say this is the Russians have a system right now where their troops go forward, they fight, then they rotate. When they go back, they rotate into comfortable positions where they can shower, they can eat, they can rest. Some of them get to go home for a brief leave, but while they're there, they get to, read the internet, read the news. So I imagine that there's conversations in the Russian units that have the characteristic of what you're talking about. What's going to happen when Trump comes in? Look, I know I interface with a lot of Russian soldiers who, when they go into the rear areas, get on my Telegram channel, reach out and talk and stuff like that before they rotate back in where they're not supposed to be. And I talk to Russian reporters who do the same thing. So I think I have an understanding of sort of the intellectual climate of the Russian army, where they are aware of the world situation and it's cognate. Now, Ukrainians, from what I'm getting, just looking at the discussions with prisoners of war, discussion with the soldiers, they're basically rushed to the front line in a deteriorating situation, a fluid situation. The Russians have broken through. We want you to defend this tree line. We dump you off in the middle of the night, dig your trenches, dig in, and we'll come and relieve you in 5 days. But 5 days come, they're not getting relieved. While they're there for 5 days, they're getting shelled. There's no connectivity. They're hungry. There's no political conversation taking place in that trench. They're not sitting there going, what do you think? When Donald Trump comes in, they're sitting there freezing, hungry, shelled, tired, exhausted, and stuff. And then when they get pulled out, it's chaos, etc. They're almost always put right back in. This is why they're collapsing. They're failing. I think the Ukrainians are going to fail, not because Donald Trump's going to become president and their morale has collapsed. They're going to fail because their system is no longer functioning. There's a reason why the Russians are advancing steadily across the front line. This isn't localized advances. The Ukrainians right now cannot sustain cohesive defense along the totality of the line of conflict, and the Russians are very cleverly picking them apart. Look, I look, Marek Karelin runs a reporter, does a fantastic Substack page. I encourage everybody to go there, and he's got a partner that does these very good maps. When I talked to him about it, he said initially the maps were too good. And the Russian command came down and said, you got to dumb your maps up a little bit because you're giving away the whole farm here. And so they've dumbed the maps up, but they're a good depiction of the reality of it. And the front, I can't keep track of it because I look at the map and I'm used to every day, for years looking at Advievka and other places, and you got a little arrow here, then you get a blue arrow counterattacking and minor movement. But so I'm looking at the names there, trying to look at things, and then I come back in a week and they're up here. I said, well, what happened here? No, they've moved up there. The Ukrainian defenses that existed from 2014 on, these heavily fortified, they're gone. Their backup defenses are gone. They're now moving into new defenses, some of which are manned. Look at the situation around Pokrovsk. They've built some, but they're running out of manpower, and that's collapsing. Chasiv Yar, I think the Russians made a major penetration into Chasiv Yar, seizing a heavily fortified center area that's going to lead to that collapse. Dnipropetrovsk is an oblast or a region of Ukraine where they haven't been preparing for war. There's no defenses there, none. And so if the Russians get into that, they're now able to move, and now the arrows, I've always said the Russians aren't doing big arrow warfare, but now you have the potential for the Russians to actually do a big arrow that can now sweep in and threaten a large cutoff of Ukraine forces, compelling a major withdrawal. This war is going south. And it has nothing to do with Donald Trump coming in. It has everything to do with the Russians executing a plan, a war of attrition. The key to a war of attrition is to understand that it's not designed to get the big arrow results. It's designed to grind the enemy down to the point where the enemy can no longer defend, and then you can push them and they collapse. The Russians have won the war of attrition. And right now, Ukraine is in a situation, and this is why Russia will never accept, in my opinion, a ceasefire. Because what the Russians have accomplished here is it didn't happen overnight. And it's a systemic thing. It's not just about the front line, because the front line is just the tip of what's going on. The front line where they're engaging, closing with, and destroying the enemy through firepower maneuver is about, killing soldiers and destroying equipment. But then you have the system of replacing soldiers and replacing equipment. And so there's the kill factor, and then there's the sustainment factor. And the Russians have shown that they have the ability to sustain the killing potential. The Ukrainians used to be able to match that, and that's why the lines didn't move that much. But now Ukraine can't. So the Ukrainians have to adapt. They have to withdraw to buy time to get more troops in. Meanwhile, behind that is what's going on in NATO and what's going on in terms of Congress and money. There's the big picture stuff. The Ukrainian system is so far behind the power curve that as long as the Russians keep the pressure on them, they'll never catch up. It's a permanent situation of unable to keep up with the Russians. The moment the Russians let up, the moment that they say, oh, we're going to have a ceasefire, the Ukrainians catch up.
Right.
Suddenly they get that surge, they catch up, and now Russia, it's a reset. It's like playing a video game. I'm trying to identify with the modern crowd here. Playing a video game where you're fighting your way to the final boss, but then there's a glitch and you have to start all over. That's what will happen to the Russians if there's a ceasefire. If there's a ceasefire, it's a reset. This is why any notion of a peace treaty that says we're going to freeze it in place and buy time, all you're saying is that it's a reset and Russia's going to have to start all over again, maybe in a more disadvantaged position. Russia right now has won this war. They really have. The war's over. If as long as Russia keeps putting this pressure on and they can sustain this for a long time, Ukraine will continue to withdraw, retreat, collapse. NATO can't keep up. The United States politically can't keep up. But if you provide a pause where something sacrifice isn't being asked to make, I can now, it's like getting behind in payments, in debt. You have an income and you have debt. And if your income can't match the debt, you're screwed because the bills keep piling up and you run out of money and things happen and all that. But if the bank said 4 months, you don't have to make any payments. That 4 months, I can build money up. I can start in this. So when the next time comes, I'm not in that panic situation. I'm now balanced my budget and all that. A ceasefire is allowing the West to balance its budget, to get its act together. Russia can't afford to do that, or else they've lost the war. That's the one way Russia can lose this war. Russia can lose this war by not winning this war.
Right. Well, I'll put it like this: if two people fighting, a pause is always going to benefit the person that's losing. If you're winning, you don't want to pause. You're getting, you got the guy down and you're pummeling on the face. Can we take a time out? No.
It's like boxing. It's like boxing. You get to the end of the round, you're like, boom, 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 boom. And the other guy's, oh, God, but ding, ding, ding. Oh, I get to go in.
Yep.
Then you come out and, but boxing is a war of attrition too, because by the 15th round, usually one side's down. Yep. But yeah, you're right. You give a pause, they refresh.
You got them on the ropes. Can we take a few minutes off? No. You know what? You can lay down and we can do a TKO. You can call the ref over and say, I uncle. That's the only option. Otherwise,
waving it off. The fight's over.
Exactly. Tap out. That we can do that.
Yeah.
That's where we are. Yeah, I think they're done. The other, there's one other thing I wanted to talk about, Scott Ritter, and let me find it. I want to ask you about this. Oh, I don't want to take up too much more of your time. Asia. I don't know if you followed it. But the whole South Korea president thing. He's finally been arrested, right? And it is, the more you look into it, it's blatantly obvious that Sullivan Blinken did this. The guy says, all right, I'm going to take over, martial law. And we find out now that he was actually going to start a war with North Korea. That he had a bunch of people and they were going to do a false flag and fire into North Korea, that they were going to kidnap the opposition. I mean, this is madness. And they were able to hold off, and now he's finally been arrested, right? I kind of got a feeling they left this guy out on a limb. I'll put it like this. If Blinken and those guys think we got you covered, they're gone Monday. And this guy's arrested, and he's done this, and he's been nabbed by the South Koreans. It ain't going to look good for him. Here's why I say that. I think he's going to sing. And I think, Scott, there's people in the Pentagon, there's people in the intelligence community, there's the State Department people have already started saying Biden told us to shut up and we weren't allowed to talk about Gaza. Here's a prediction. People are going to come out and sing like pigeons about things that were going on in the Biden administration that will be shocking to the conscience of the American people and the world. Scott.
Yeah. I just want to remind everybody that it was just this past spring that Biden brought early summer. He brought the South Korean president and the Japanese prime minister into the White House. He forgot, you remember, I mean, because he was brain dead by then and he misrepresented him and all this, but he was the South Korean president sang to him. It was a love fest. They created this trilateral relationship. It sounds cool, but let's think for a second, Garland, what you just said. This guy was going to start a false flag war with North Korea. All right. Now, this is the guy that Biden sat down and said, we're going to start doing joint nuclear war planning with you. We're going to take an American boomer, that's a submarine with ballistic missiles on it, and we're going to park it in a South Korean port as a show of strength, because we're trying to create the impression that we are prepared to defend you, and we want the North Koreans to understand that. So we gave a boomer to a South Korean president that was going to start a false flag war with North Korea. Do you guys understand how freaking stupid and dangerous this is? This is American policy under Biden in a nutshell. It's all a facade. It's all a lie. Everything. This is like, me. I don't know. I'm trying to come up with an analogy that we're, like me and my neighbor saying, "Hey, why don't we do a joint project in that little piece of property there? We'll make a park and we'll attract families and all this stuff." And all of a sudden the police raid their house and you find out down in the basement the man's a mass murderer, serial killer with a torture chamber. And you're going, what the heck? But the worst thing is the Biden administration says, well, we know he's a mass murderer, torture. He's got a torture chamber, but we're still going to do the project as if everything's normal anyways. South Korea is a fundamentally broken nation. Anybody who's been studying South Korea for years knows that it's not a democracy. It's this weird little thing of power elites. The military is in control, and it exists for one reason and one reason only: to unify with the North through force if necessary. That is the mission statement of South Korea. It's not to thrive as an economically independent democracy. It exists to capture the North. And if you don't know what Kim Jong-un just did this past year, then you don't understand why this South Korean president is doing what he's doing. Kim Jong-un woke up and said, I'm no longer interested in unification with the South. We would like to end the state of war, but this is not a demilitarized zone, not a ceasefire line. It is a permanent border separating you from me. I don't want to have anything to do with you guys ever again, because he knows the sickness of the South. And he blew up the roads and he blew up the trail, and you saw the South Koreans panic. You can't do that. You can't pull the plug on us, because then we no longer have a reason to exist. We only exist to forcefully take you over. And we can only do that if you believe that you want unification, if unification is the goal of all you Koreans. And Kim Jong-un said, no, it's not our goal anymore. We have no desire to be part of you. You rot in hell. We're going to Russia, and we're going to fix all of our problems. And the South Koreans went into an absolute flat-out panic. And that's why this happened. There's no other reason for him to want to start a fake war and all this stuff. It's because South Korea no longer has a legitimate reason to exist. And you watch, South Korea is going to go into a free fall, spin, collapse, because this is a sickness. The people that are prosecuting them, half of them don't know what they're doing. I'm not talking about the law here. They're scared. The South Koreans are scared. What are we to do? Since our creation, and remember, if you guys study the North Korean War and all that, the guys who were the bad guys weren't the guys in the North. Syngman Rhee, and we're talking about dictator, brutal thug. The South were not the good guys here. The North was more Korean than the South. The South was a tool
it was military dictatorship up until like 89.
Yeah, well, it still is a military dictatorship because the military controls everything.
Yeah.
So yeah, this is fascinating stuff. I had to laugh. I saw something that the South Korean president was in a convoy driving to the prosecutor's office, and it sort of reminded me of like O.J. Simpson,
Yeah, was he in a white Bronco?
Yeah, white Bronco going down the thing. I'm like, okay, well, this is the South Korean version of O.J. Simpson, but no, South Korea is a fundamentally broken nation. I feel sorry for the people because they're not well served by their leadership. Again,
it creates an opening, doesn't it? I think it creates a political opening in a way, because the South Korean people, I will say this, them and their politicians were very brave and they fought through this thing. You got to give them a lot of credit. But now Trump's coming to power. If Trump says, I want to meet with Kim Jong-un and try to get some kind of a deal after the frightful situation that they've been through, I have to think that there'll be more support for it. I have met with some of the South Korean and spoken at some events for some of the South Korean peace groups here in the United States, Korean peace groups. And let me first say this. They were very pro-Trump, very pro-Trump. This was a couple of years ago, and specifically because they wanted a deal because they had family on both sides. There's going to be tremendous support in South Korea, particularly now, if Donald Trump says, I want to meet with Kim Jong-un. Not that he'll be able to get a deal. And might I add, Russia's hardening up North Korea in a way that they'll be able to further protect themselves. They're hardening up Iran in a way that, who knows, maybe the Trump people, instead of attacking Iran, which doesn't seem likely now, will say, hey, I want a nuclear deal with Iran. The table could be set by the neocons for some of these deals.
There's plenty of opportunity there. What we can say is that Trump has inherited a global climate that because of the failures across the board of the rules-based international order and all that, opportunities exist. The question is Trump capable of taking advantage of that? I think you're 100% right. What is one of the first things Trump did when he's trying to improve relations with Koreans? Stop the military nonsense, stop the exercises, stop the provocation, stop the whole thing, because he understood the problem. And remember this, Trump has met Kim Jong-un. He has talked with Kim Jong-un. They exchanged love letters. So he knows Kim Jong-un. When Trump says, I know a foreign leader, this is one of the few times I actually believe he actually does have insight into Kim Jong-un. So the day of the denuclearization is over.
Right.
You're not going to denuclearize North Korea. But what you can do is get a peace treaty. And what you can do is end the state of war, which is the first step if you ever want to begin the process of taking things down. If you ever want to get North Korea to talk about, giving up its nuclear arsenal, or at least lowering the nuclear arsenal, you have to start from peace, stability. Trump now has an important card to play with the South Koreans and the Japanese. The frickin' South Korean president almost took us to a nuclear war without consulting us on his own volition. That's unacceptable. And so bring it down. I think you're right. There is an opportunity here for a deal to be made. Look, I've said this. I'm going to watch me throw your chat into.
Yeah, they're fun.
This is going to be fun.
Let's freak out the chat. I'm all for that.
Trump, by bringing about this ceasefire, has done more to earn the Nobel Peace Prize than Barack Obama ever did. Trump has the potential of ending the conflict, or at least help facilitating an end to the conflict in Ukraine. That alone is worthy of a Nobel Peace Prize. Trump can go and bring peace to North Korea. You know who got peace to end the Russo-Japanese war? You know who got the Nobel Peace Prize? Teddy Roosevelt. All right? For ending the Russian-Japanese war. Trump can go in and bring peace to the Korean Peninsula. Only Trump can do this. Biden couldn't do it. Biden created the problems. Biden created Ukraine. Biden created or wouldn't end this. These are all problems created. Taiwan and China. Trump can end that. And literally, in literally 100 days.
Deal with Iran.
And
the Iranians, I just saw the president the other day, and the Iranians are saying, yeah, we're ready to talk.
We're ready to talk. So literally in 100 days, it might take a little bit longer. Trump can end 5 of the most dangerous hotspots in the world. He can bring it to an end. That's worthy of 5 Nobel Peace Prizes. They need and again, I mean, I think it would be hilarious to have Trump go to Sweden and pick up the Nobel Peace Prize. That would be the funniest acceptance speech that will ever been delivered in history, because he's an arrogant prick and it will be just beautiful. But he'll never get it because they won't nominate him, because everybody hates Trump, hates him. But whatever you think about this guy, I'm not here defending his narcissism, his behavior towards women. I'm not defending any of that. In 100 days, Donald Trump can do what no American president in recent history even tried to do: end every single one of these hot spots and bring some sort of peace and stability to the world. And I don't know who you are, where you stand politically. That's a good thing. That's a good thing.
Well, I know we got to go in a second, but I got to end with saying this. Donald Trump recently said, I said I'm going to meet with Putin. He said, yeah, I should meet with Putin and Xi. We're the 3 most powerful people in the world, and we should have a world power summit. I agree. But here's the other part of it. Yeah, I love that. Here's the thing about it. If you think about it, when Trump meets with Vladimir Putin, which apparently he's definitely going to do, they're very tight with Iran. They're very tight with North Korea. Getting some kind of a deal and rapport and all of that with Putin opens the door. Putin's extremely powerful right now and a highly respected statesman, although people in America may not understand that. He is a highly respected statesman around the world. He can get Trump in. If Putin says to the Iranians or the North Koreans, hey guys, I talked with Trump. Yeah, I'd like you to talk with him. Let's have a talk with him. They will do it. They will do it. Vladimir Putin, in my opinion, is part of the key, a big part of the key. Nobody trusts the U.S. after Biden, ever. Don't even want to talk to us, can't stand us. But they all trust Putin. And if Vladimir Putin, we'll talk with Trump. Let me see. I'll talk with my buddy Xi and Iran. Let me make some calls for you, Donald. Maybe I can set up some meetings. To me, that's the key. And that can be done.
Well, but there's an important aspect to this too. Because Putin has a card also. Not only do they respect him, but Putin tried to keep Assad in power. I'm talking about going back. Putin pulled Assad aside and said, you have to do this. You have to meet with the Turks. You have to do this. You have to do that. And Assad said no. And in the end, Putin went, "Do svidaniya, you're gone." I think Putin now has the ability to say, I can help you live, but I can't stop you from dying if you choose to do so. Meaning going to the Iranians. Look, we'll see what happens on January 17th. This deal. It's not going to be a NATO alliance.
No.
And so I think Putin's able to say, look, we can work with you and the Americans to create the conditions for a sovereign, secure Iran, defended with a military relationship with us. It's plugged into BRICS and all that, or you can die. But that nuclear thing that you guys are holding on to right now, because remember this, the Russians, they are part of the JCPOA. They're part of the Iran nuclear deal. Russia bought into the notion that you have to contain the Iranian nuclear program. Russia does not want an Iranian nuclear bomb. They are dead set against that. And so Russia is supportive of anything that brings that under control, so long as it's not being used, as every American administration in the past has used. The argument of disarming Iran's nuclear program is just a front for regime change. See, Trump can change that dynamic by saying, nope, it's not a front for regime change. It's a front for regime enhancement. You get rid of these nuclear weapons capabilities, bring it under control, and you and Russia can go off and do your thing. And maybe we'll lift sanctions, and maybe we'll do business with you. But the nuclear thing has to be dealt with. Trump, for all of his faults, and there are many, I wrote a book about this called Deal Breaker, and it basically talked about how Donald Trump destroyed the JCPOA. But the crux of the book was he was the most honest American president when it came to Iran's nuclear program of all. More honest than George W. Bush or H.W. More honest, let's see, 2001. So that would be W. Bush. More honest than W. More honest than Obama. More honest than Trump. More honest than Biden. Because Trump just basically came up and said, this is a bad deal. And he was right. It is a horrible deal. If you look at it from the American dynamic. When you say, as the American intelligence community has said, that Iran had a nuclear weapons program to build a nuclear weapon. Now, I disagree with that. I think the intelligence is wrong, but that doesn't matter.
Right.
When the intelligence community briefs the president, says they have a nuclear weapons program, but in 2003, it went dormant, and we don't know what happened to it. Now I'm the president going, well, that's problematic, isn't it? You're telling me they had a nuclear weapons program, and now it's gone away, and you don't know what happened to it. And now you're going to enter a deal where we've never talked about this nuclear weapons program and where it went. And we're going to enter a deal that's going to allow them at the end of the sunset clauses to have all of the components of a nuclear weapons program should they want to build a nuclear bomb. And you're trying to get me to accept this deal by saying that they don't have a nuclear weapons program, but you told me they did and that it's gone dormant. So what happens if we give them all this capability and that nuclear weapons program comes back out? Now they have a nuclear weapon. This is a bad deal. And from that logic, Trump was 100% correct, 100% correct. And so was Obama, but he was a little less honest. In April of 2015, before they entered it, Obama gave an interview to NPR where he said, yeah, the sunset clauses, as they come close to expiring, we'll reevaluate the entire thing. And if we're not comfortable with where Iran is, we'll just pull the plug on the deal. The Americans were never going to implement this deal, never see it through to fruition. We always lied. Trump was the most honest damn president we've ever had when it comes to this, because he said, this is a bad deal. He's being honest about how he felt. I'm going to do away with it. Decisive action. No diplomacy, no lying. Not like Biden, who came in, has been lying to the Iranians from day one, trying to get the JCPOA back up. But he's lying. The Iranians can't trust him. Trump's the only president that Iran can trust because he will say what he wants. I think there's a window of opportunity here. And I think Vladimir Putin plays a very important role in this, that he can give the Iranians sort of the back support. It's like, if you're going into an interview on your own, or you're going to interview with your powerful uncle behind you going, that's okay, I'm with you here. They ask a tough question, I'll help you with the answer. Putin's there to help Iran get through this process. So I think you're 100% correct.
Yeah, and I think part of this deal too is this. I believe the Russians everybody's looking ahead, right? And I think this is what I would think if I'm the Russians and the Iranians. Look, Iranians, I'm going to load you. You got good weapons, but I'm going to load you. I'm going to give you the best of the best. I'm going to really, really load you up conventionally so that you'll be protected and people will have to think twice, 3 and 4 times before attacking you. And therefore, you won't need the nuclear weapons and you can make a nuclear deal. So this Iranian-Russian deal, which there is a military component, I think, allows the Russians to further enhance the defensive capabilities of Iran, which makes it easier for Iran to make a deal because it's going to be harder to attack them. It puts Iran in a better situation. And there are all these people not understanding in the chat, no, Iran needs nukes. They forget. If Iran gets nukes, you damn sure believe they can bet this, the Saudis will want them within hours.
Yeah.
And the UAE will want them. And now you'll have a proliferation of nukes in the Middle East. What happens when one of those governments falls and HTS style ISIS people get in charge of that? They're pushing a button. So this is not just about Iranian nukes. It's about Putin and people around the world looking and saying, we don't want to open that door of nukes in the Middle East. We already got it open elsewhere. We're trying to close it.
It's not just nukes, but again, it's not my job to tell Russians about their country. They know their country as well. So if you're a Russian, and I see them in the chat right now commenting, you remember what happened in the 1990s, right? Mm-hmm. If you weren't alive back then, at least you might want to study history. You remember there was a big push to get the Chechens to withdraw from Russia. In fact, they did that. They actually had the Republic of Ichkeria because they successfully fought Russia in the first Chechen War. And you do know that Kazan, Tatarstan, was moving in that direction. They wanted to get out too, but a deal was cut with Yeltsin about autonomy. And so Tatarstan has autonomy, Chechnya has autonomy, and right now things are going okay. But the scenario that Garland just put out there, where, because I saw a comment saying Putin wants a nuclear-armed Iran. No, he doesn't. You have no freaking clue what you're talking about when you say that. That is the dumbest freaking statement that anybody could make. Stop it. Stop pretending that that's what the Russians want. I know what the Russians want because they've told me they don't want a nuclear-armed Iran because everything Garland said will come true. If Iran gets nuclear weapons, Saudi Arabia gets it, and next, Egypt's pushing for it, and all these are vulnerable countries. I had a conversation with 2 Egyptians the other day. Sisi's gone. He's on his way out. There's going to be a Muslim Brotherhood type uprising. Do you want a nuclear-armed Egypt that now has a Muslim Brotherhood take over, and now you have an Islamic fundamentalist nation with nuclear weapons? Saudi Arabia is very vulnerable. You want them to start the nuclear process and have their pathetic little, kingdom fall apart, and now you have HTS type head choppers with nuclear weapons? Russia doesn't want it. Why? Because they have so many goddamn Muslims in their country that could potentially be radicalized by this. It's the last thing Russia wants. Russia wants stability. And so they will never go for that. I apologize for getting upset, but
no, you're right.
I don't like stupidity. And any concept that Russia wants Iran to have nuclear weapons is a stupid statement because Russia has never said that, never hinted at that. In fact, everything they've done is the exact opposite of that direction. So no, stop it. It's wrong. It's wrong thinking. Nuclear weapons are bad. Well, what about North Korea, Scott? It ain't over yet, guys. It ain't over yet. All right? They have them, but it's not the stability they think they have. And watch me. If there's a peace treaty in the South, the pressure will be put on to lower that threshold. You guys do know that we're ready. I mean, I had this conversation with Dmitry Trenin, and I'll leave you with this. And this is for all the Russians in the chat right now. Chew on this for a minute, will you? Work with me on this one. How old is Vladimir Putin? Well, he's in his 70s. Now, he's in good health. I've watched him flip people on the judo, and I've watched him walk, and he's a cocky-looking guy. He's confident. He's intelligent. He's smart. What's he going to be in 10 years? In his 80s. Now, how many guys in their 80s are flipping judo chops, walking around confident? Maybe Putin's the guy that can do that. Probably not. Russia's going to need a new leader. Who is that leader? Now, they're all going, Medvedev. No. He's not going to be the leader. Russia needs a leader, and they don't have a system capable of producing a new Putin. Because of the pressure the West has put on Russia, and again, we go to the 1994 long telegram written by Charles Fair Mary that talks about how in supporting Yeltsin, we destroyed any chance of Russia having genuine democratic institutions. That Yeltsin destroyed democracy in Russia. And then when we tried to rebuild it, we did it as a CIA front. And so Putin's been fighting the damage done by Yeltsin and the fact that the CIA, every time they call about democracy, opposition, it's a CIA front. And so basically Russia is a one-party system, united Russia. That's it. That's fine as long as Putin calling the shots. What's going to happen when you replace Putin? Is there another leader out there capable of holding Russia together? Russia will go through a period of great uncertainty and great vulnerability. Again, I've been doing a little bit of research in this, guys. Do some study in the Novosibirsk. Please do it. It's a screwed up oblast politically, corrupt as the day is long. We're talking about old power elites that are manipulating, arresting their opposition. My friend's in jail because he dared run for mayor of Novosibirsk. And my God, you can't do that unless Shimkiv, the head of the Legislative Assembly, bless you. But Shimkiv tried to fire him to put his girlfriend in there, got the FSB to set him up, put him in jail, hold him without taking him to trial to break him, because that's what the FSB has done in Novosibirsk for decades long. And Novosibirsk is not alone. Other Russian oblasts and districts operate in this way too. And they're held together because Putin has put in a veneer of federal control that exists because of Vladimir Putin. When he goes and that federal control goes away, what happens to these rogue oblasts? Do you know how much pro-Ukrainian support is in Novosibirsk? A whole bunch. Do you know that the last political movement that was suppressed by the Novosibirsk authorities before United Russia came in was Navalny? Navalny was big in Novosibirsk. Okay, guys, Russia is a country that has a lot of problems. Putin has been able to, stabilize it and put a veneer of federal control over it. But who comes after Putin? And if you don't know who comes after Putin, you're screwed. And if you don't know how they're going to pick who comes after Putin, you're screwed. So now that's the good news. You ready for the bad news? In February 2026, the New START treaty expires. And for all the Russians out there saying, well, we don't need arms control. We got nuclear weapons. We're strong. You're going to be in an arms race with the United States. And you don't want to be in an arms race with the United States. And what's going to happen is about 2034, 2035, when Russia goes into a constitutional existential crisis on who's going to replace Putin, you're going to be in the middle of a goddamn arms race, nuclear arms race with the United States. And so you're going to go through political crisis where it's existential in nature. Who's going to be our president in the middle of a frickin' arms race, nuclear weapons with the United States? You tell me how that ends. So for all you Russians out there, stop it. Okay? It's not, you have a great president. You have a great president who's brought you out of disaster, but you don't have a great future. You're resting on your laurels. There's a lot of problems coming down the road, and you've got to find a way to fix it. And you don't do that by being cocky and stupid about how Russia wants nuclear weapons in Iran. No, they don't. The key to Russia's survival is stability. Stability, not conflict. And so Russia has some work to do, a lot of work to do. They have to bring an end to this conflict in Ukraine. They have to find a way to normalize relationships with Europe. They have to find a way to make BRICS succeed. That's not a guaranteed outcome, by the way. And they have to get along with the United States. They need arms control. Russia will never do arms control. Yes, you will, because you have to survive. And then you have to get your own act together. Fix Novosibirsk. Go fix Novosibirsk. Then fix Omsk and fix everything else that's happening down there. And then come up with a system that says when Vladimir Putin steps down as president, as he will, the person that becomes president will have the same legitimacy, authority, power, and control that Putin has. Because that's what happens here in the United States. You see, we actually have a process that allows for the transfer of power from Joe Biden, who hates Donald Trump, but the transfer of power is going to be made. We sort of know what's going to happen. What's going to happen to Russia when Vladimir Putin steps down? And if you can't answer that question, you've got some serious problems. Anyway, I just wanted to leave on that. I'm sorry to lose my temper.
No, I blame you. And I'll make one quick sentence. I'll leave it at this. I think it's interesting that the whole, Trumpian view of the MAGA movement is from what I hear recently. We got to get out of these foreign entanglements because we got a lot of problems at home, and we got to kind of try to stabilize America, stabilize the border. I think that's the position of Trump. It's interesting because looking at the Putin government, it seems to me that there's an element of that saying we got to get this. We'd like to get this Ukraine thing stabilized. That way we can stabilize the things we need at home for the future. You know what I mean? Like countries are literally saying, like any sane leader would say, we got to kind of get disentangled from military problems and issues so that we can stabilize the situation here. So that's interesting that they want. Look at the Iranians. What do they want? They want to stabilize their economy and grow their economy. You know what I mean? That more and more leaders, an Orban, on and on. You got more and more leaders saying we're getting entangled in all of this outside stuff. We got to try to stabilize at home. And it seems to me that's who the voters are voting for these days. ScottRitter.com is where you want to go to find out all of Scott's good works. There is a donate button there. So when you go to ScottRitter.com, make sure you donate if you can, and share that on all your social media platforms. Also, share this on all your social media platforms. Hey, we got a join button. If you can afford it, join. Scott, you can go ahead and go. We got some super chat, so I'm going to go ahead and, or whatever they are, I'm going to go ahead and answer those for a while, but I know you got lots to do. Thanks a lot, Scott Ritter. Don't forget, everybody, ScottRitter.com. Have a great day, Scott.
Thanks, Sean. I'll see you on Saturday or
Sounds
Sunday.
Good. On Sunday. Sounds good. All right, so let's look at the soup. I saw the Sparkster. I saw old Sparky. He's up to no good there. He's got plenty to say. So today we shall go through. Oh, we got a lot of them. A lot of people. Woo-hoo-hoo. Well, we're going to go through as many of them as we can. All right, we got new membership. We got all kind of stuff going on. Let's get going. Holy moly, there's a new member. That's great. It's like $4.99 a month or something to be membership, guys. So please join the chat. All right. Sparky says, those huge political donations are one half put in a campaign account, half in a post-campaign account. Trump's not playing ball. So her donations suddenly dropped from 100 million to 50 million. Her, I guess he's meaning Harris. They're in deep trouble. They're still trying to get money because they owe a lot of people money. All right. The Sparkster says, someone said that Trump's first administration picks was a clown car, but this time it's a clown bus. Bottom line is this. Trump goes through. I don't pay attention as much to his administration as I did before because he fires people so fast. You know, this is the first draft of his administration. Let's go with that. Sparkster says, anytime someone says Israel is our only friend in the Middle East, I can't help but think before Israel, we had no enemies in the Middle East. John Sheehan. I love that one. That's a good one. It's Sparkster's on fire. He says, free Greenland from Danish tyranny and brutal oppression. Bring them freedom and democracy, especially if they got oil. Everybody that needs oil needs good old American democracy. Sparkster's on fire. Hegseth is a Lindsey Graham pick and protege. Graham introduced him to the media around 2010 as part of some bogus Veterans for War type group. Hegseth owes his own whole career to Graham. I'll say this, if he goes against Trump, he'll need Graham for a new career because Trump fires him quick. Sparkster. That new Romanian NATO site is a terrific hazelnut destination. You know, I was thinking the same thing. If there's a conflict and about 10 seconds later, there will be an Oreshnikov, and that would be the end of that Romanian base. But maybe Georgescu, if he gets in, which I think he will, is going to end that thing. Scott, tell Putin to negotiate a Russian naval base on the Straits of Hormuz with Iran in their upcoming agreement. They could co-locate with Iran if needed. It'd be a good idea. Here. I'm with you. I think, who knows, Iran may show up with nuclear subs soon. Sparkster, build a better world with bricks. Sparkster is on fire. How about Alina S. says, good evening from Cyprus. Hey, Alina, thanks and hello. You're hanging out there with my main man, Alex Christoforo. Russia can hold referendums in Western Ukraine in 3 years to see if they want to remain with Russia. If not, give it to Poland, Romania, or wherever. Hey, in Western Ukraine, good idea. I forgot I didn't get that. You are right. Who the hell? Poland doesn't want to make Ukraine Russia again. They got some real problems with the bandit rights in Poland. Let's see. Don't leave a rump state called Ukraine, lest it remain a Nato playground, a carpetbagger's money laundry, and a BlackRock property. You're right about that? You are right. How about we look at the Sparkster? Free Canada from the Castro regime. Sparkster. Oh boy. Melissa. Thank you, Melissa Vatten. Let's keep going. We got let's go to Sparkster's rolling. I'd have had my nuclear war if it weren't for Scott Ritter and you meddling kids. There we go. Joe Biden. They pulled the mask off at the end of the Scooby-Doo show. Sparkster says even made fake North Korean uniforms. Yes, in fact, they did. Fake North Korea. They were up to no good in North Korea, and it's going to come out. I believe that Blinken and Sullivan were behind that crap. Sparkster says, Scott, will Putin resort to human waves of North Korean GMO super soldiers with shovels? There you go. I think he will. Human waves. That's all the Russians do. They fight with shovels and human waves. And I think they're going to have washing machines. They'll be driving in wheeled washing machines. Let's go. Replace the ridiculous Marco Rubio with Dennis Rodman as Secretary of State. That's a good idea. I mean, he was a great rebounder. I love Rodman. He's hilarious. And multicolored hair. How about we go with, and he's friends with Kim Jong-un. That'll work. Scott's strategy is ingenious. It will either eventually expose Trump as just another imperial tool, or Trump will deliver the peace we want. Exactly. You know what? I find it hilarious when people say, Trump's gonna fill in the blank. No, he's not gonna fill in the blank. And I'm like, oh, well, Nostradamus, you know exactly what Trump's going to do. He'll never do this. He will surely do this. I will say this. After this little ceasefire incident with the Israelis, I misjudged Trump. I was like, he's just going to double down on this whole thing. And Trump's like, it's over. Stop it. And I'm like, maybe, perhaps I don't know as Trump as well as I do. I think we're going to have to watch what Trump does, not what he says. I think we had an indicator when he released that video, Jeffrey Sachs video. I read Rodman's book many years ago. I believe he's a genuine good guy. Yeah, Rodman seems like a good guy. I really enjoyed watching him with the Bulls back then. That he was hilarious. And a great player. Lena Zinkova Garcia. Thank you, Lena. I probably pronounced it wrong. Lena. All right, we're moving. Oh, excuse me, Sparky. But China wants stability too. Yes, they do. And let's hope that we get some stability of some type, for God's sake, because we've had nothing but instability with these friggin' lunatics. All righty. Oh, we got more. Sparkster. Miriam Adelson's donations to Trump. Sorry, I wasn't clear. Oh, okay. Thanks a lot there, Sparkster. All right. Now we're going to check Rockfin. Oh, okay. Rockfin. Drew Tech says, it is good to see peace. That is true. It's quite concerning that technically speaking, Israel won the war in the Middle East. I don't think they won the war because they said we're going to destroy Hamas. They said several things. We're going to push the Hezbollah back to the beyond the Litani River, and we're going to do this. They have achieved none of the goals that they set forward. So I understand what you're saying, Drew Tech, but how can Israel claim a victory? We're going to take the hostages back. We're going to do everything. They have not been able to achieve one single thing they said they were going to do. So, all right, well, I got to run. Holy moly, I got to get ready. I got 15 minutes. I'm going to have Mark Svoboda. Yikes. Okay, I got to get ready. I'm getting ready to have Svoboda on, guys. I'm out.